Hello and welcome to this latest edition of the Predictive World here at SalesChoice. My name is Malay Upadhyay. I'm your co-host, as always, Chief Growth and Operations Officer in the company, and I'm joined, as always, by my CEO and partner, Dr. Cindy Gordon. Our topic today is quite a different one. It is literature reviews automation in life sciences. How do you do it with AI? We will be diving deep into it with reference to the DistillerSR story. What is this company about? What does it do? Well, before we get into that, just a quick recap on what the predictive world is all about. This is a forum, a channel where over the years we have hosted numerous thought leaders, experts over webinars, podcasts, videos, you name it. And all these conversations have given us rich insight into the world of AI, sales, productivity, and all the different amazing use cases that organizations can benefit from. I invite you to visit saleschoice.com/resources to check these out. And of course, that is also where this particular podcast will find its home. Now, with that, coming back to the here and now, Cindy and I are joined today by Peter Oblinas. He is the CEO of DistillerSR, and he is accompanied by his, as she mentioned before the call, worker bee and the VP of Marketing, Dipali Bhatt. Dipali and Peter, we welcome you to the conversation. Thank you for your time here today.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Now, Peter, as I mentioned, is the CEO of DistillerSR. He is also a pioneer in the literature reviews automation, and he has worked globally in many different roles across many companies, and he happens to belong to my alma mater, Queens, as well. Now, his company, DistillerSR, which Peter will be talking more about, is created by Evidence Partners and is the market leader in AI-enabled literature review automation software, where most of the big organizations out there in the pharma industry and governments, NGOs, they all use it and benefit from it. Just how exactly is all of this made possible is what our conversation will focus on today. If you would like to look at some of these customer proof points before I turn it over to Cindy, please go to distillersr.com/resources/case studies, where you'll find all the good work that has been done with the likes of Philips, Nuvasive, global eye care device manufacturer, and so many others. So with that, and without further delay, let me turn it over to Cindy to welcome Peter again and initiate our discussion. Cindy.
Great. Thanks so much, Malay, and Peter. Thanks so much for being with us today. It's a sunny day where I am at in Vancouver. Looking behind me, I can see the mountains, and don't know what it's like in Ottawa where you are today, but hopefully it's warmed up a little bit.
It's not sunny, but we'll take it for now.
Okay. Peter, one of the things I always like to do in these sessions is really to just step back and appreciate, where did the idea come from? I mean, that germination process, and there's often pivots, as you know, in germination to get to where you are, but I'd love it if you could just give us a sense of, the evolution and how the business idea started.
Sure. We were fortunate enough actually to find a problem that we could solve. And the way it came about was actually in a previous company of mine, we were doing clinical trial data management software for clinical trials. And one of our offices was located in a hospital setting. And the research teams that sat around us were doing clinical trials, but they were also doing systematic literature reviews. And back in the day, if you were doing systematic literature reviews, you were tracking everything in Excel, basically stacks of paper and Excel. In fact, one of the lead researchers, when I asked her how much paper was involved in the process, said, well, to give you an idea, if the stack of scientific literature on my desk right now were to topple over, I would probably be killed by it. And they came to us and said, you guys do a lot of work in software. Is there any way we could help automate this process, this literature review process? And that's how the idea got started. They had already prototyped a rudimentary web-based solution we took that idea and ran with it. Eventually, after TrialStat, decided to spin up a company, which was Evidence Partners, and then DistillerSR, focused exclusively on that particular niche. So basically, we were very fortunate to be introduced to an acute problem in an area that initially we didn't have a lot of domain expertise in, but we were surrounded by people who did, and they taught us all the nuances of the process and how to make it better for them, and by extension, how to make it better for everybody who's doing this kind of research.
That is just a wonderful germination story, because you think about it, it's like almost being a cultural anthropologist, where you're right there, right in the midst of seeing how they're doing their work. And there's a lot of value in tight jobs to be done, clarity, and not building something, where you're trying to invent a problem. So I love the fact you said acute problem, and they were able to guide you with the nuances and then create that kind of collaborative DNA to create the output. So obviously a lot's passed on since those early germination, Peter. If you just step back and maybe just describe a little bit about your company's product offerings, just role play with me. I'm a CEO of one of your target customers, and just let me know. I just said, Peter, what do you do?
Yeah. So if you're a CEO of one of our customers, you may have heard of systematic literature reviews, or you may not have. It happens quite a ways down the ladder usually in the regulatory departments, people who get the products through the regulatory hurdles that are required to get medical devices and pharmaceutical products to market. Part of that process is what is called a systematic literature review. And essentially all that is you want to be able to show that your product is safe, effective, and has clinical benefit. So there's a good reason why your product deserves to be on the market, and it won't hurt people, and it does what it's supposed to do. And there's lots of ways to show that. One of them is to do a clinical trial or a number of clinical trials. Clinical trials are incredibly expensive. They're dangerous. They take a long time. Other alternatives include conducting a systematic literature review, which is to look at all of the scientific peer-reviewed publications that are out there that describe your product or a similar product or a comparable product. You take the references that are relevant to answering those questions, and you extract all the key data from them, and then you analyze them in aggregate. So what you're doing is actually looking at the results of a whole large number of trials together, and that's actually a much more powerful statistic than to use a single trial or a couple of trials. In fact, systematic literature reviews are the cornerstone of evidence-based medicine. That's the most fundamental, most powerful piece of evidence you can produce, is a systematic literature review. So your company, Madam CEO, is doing literature reviews for a whole pile of reasons. They're doing it at the beginning, before they do a clinical trial, to see what the state of the art is out there. What have people already done? And so we don't reinvent the wheel, and so that we don't do a trial that is bigger than it needs to be, or involves more patients than it needs to have, or more interventions. We want to make it safe and as compact as possible. So you'll do a literature review to assess that. And then once you're through that and you've got a product that looks like it does what it's supposed to do, you'll do a literature review again to look at the state of the art of the market, and then to look at specifically your product or products just like yours, to evaluate, again, to show safety, efficacy, and clinical benefit. And you will submit that as part of your regulatory dossier to the regulating bodies. And hopefully, if everything goes well, your product gets approved and it enters the market. And now you're required to monitor for any signals that your product may be harming people. So it's basically called post-market surveillance or pharmacovigilance in the drug world. And so one of the mechanisms we do for that is, again, a systematic literature review, an ongoing periodic review, continuously searching for new material that may be relevant to your product, and then looking for any signals within there that may indicate issues with your product. There are side benefits to it as well, though. Not only could it find safety issues with your product, you may find situations where your product's being used off-label for something that was not intended. And that may open up the possibility of investigating whether or not maybe you should market it for those other other interventions and maybe broaden your market a little bit. So there's all kinds of benefits as well to post-market surveillance beyond the pure safety element of it. But all of those steps involve literature review. If your team's not using our product, they're probably using Excel. And it takes a long time to do one of these literature reviews. When we first entered the market, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 months to do a literature review. Tens of thousands of cells of data. You're going to have lots of errors in your data because you're manually tracking it, and you won't be able to find those errors. And then you'll submit errors to the regulators. They will find errors in your data set. Your product's now on hold as we go through that process. So
not a good place to be in. I love the term about evidence-based audit and also the life cycle construct, right? Where once you've launched a product and you've got it into the market, the ongoing surveillance aspect and continual attribution, right? So when you're actually out there, is it complex to sell to the different stakeholders, or it's just seen as just they absolutely need it for all the reasons that you've mentioned it? Just a little bit of a sense, because obviously when you're dealing with regulators, the value change can be pretty complicated. They would have existing practices, processes. So who do you really need to get to really drive the value proposition of the DistillerSR platform?
Yeah, I mean, when we first entered the market, we sold to the doers, the people who were actually on the ground doing the literature reviews or managing that process or those departments. And in that case, it's kind of like selling a pocket calculator to somebody who only has an abacus. It's really obvious. The value proposition is right there in front of you, and there's not a lot of sales required to get somebody to give it a try, at least. As you move further along and you start to deploy this enterprise-wide, obviously there's a much more nuanced sales process and a lot more stakeholders involved, and that's a whole other ballgame. So we sell at both tiers, often working our way up the food chain from the implementation level. But again, we kind of do a little bit of both.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? When enterprise sales cycles, as we both know, saw that you're former Oracle, I'm former Xerox. So, we both appreciate the complexity of coverage and that you need to, as we used to always say, go broad and deep. You can't rely on just a few stakeholders, especially in a complex sale. But, to your point, the clarity of the value proposition is very distinctive. And the amount of increased efficiency and productivity that a client can benefit from as well in terms of the literature review. And I know, having gone through my doctoral studies, boy, I could have used something like this. You think about, although it wasn't for clinical trials, it's just the body of research to really validate that you have done a very thorough literature review, right? Maybe another product, Peter. Peter, in terms of the customer landscape, I know you've got so many customers, but are there any stories that you can share, that are benefiting from your technology? I don't know if you can mention any names, but you may not be able to, but just some of the value propositions that your customers are experiencing. I know often customers, they chit chat with the founders and say, boy, Peter, this is really making my life so much easier. I'm so happy that we found you. And just anything that you can share, just to add a little bit of incremental energy and any humor as well is always appreciated.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you two very different ones. One is would be a medical device manufacturer who found quite late in the game that their product was harming humans, and they didn't pick up on it anywhere nearly as early as they would like to have, or what the regulators would have deemed would have been appropriate either. We got brought in as part of the remediation process. They needed to come up with a better way to do this, and we've been with them now for, I'm going to say, 5 or 6 years. It's actually an interesting Netflix documentary called The Bleeding Edge, which highlights a whole bunch of products that have gone horribly wrong. A lot of those companies are now our customers. Post issues, right? They recognized that there were improvements required, and they jumped on it. A completely different use case would have been with COVID. Here in Canada, Theresa Tam, our person in charge of COVID really for Canada was basically her office was issuing new guidelines on a weekly basis, pretty much, on how we deal with the ever-changing environment of COVID. And where are they getting this information from? It's from basically real-time literature surveillance. And so their group, a very small group of people, was ingesting massive amounts of, you can imagine, thousands of new publications a day coming out on this. And there's no way you could possibly have parsed this with just using humans. It would have been possible to stay on top of it. But our tool uses AI to help with the screening process and also to identify key elements or attributes that you're looking for in documents. And they were able to filter through it all very quickly. And that was used to inform public policy on COVID, like I said, pretty much in real time. So we're really proud of that, actually, that the product could contribute in that way and help out that way.
Yeah, that's one of these stories that there really should have been more public relations around, right? Because you're right, Peter, obviously we saw, what the policy positions were, and they were shifting, right? But we didn't really appreciate all of the mechanics, right? And the literature intelligence that was behind the scenes. I mean, and also the fact that Canada was really trying to ascertain what would be the best position, right? To share. It's one of these things that maybe another day we can explore more. I just wish more of that had been in the public arena, right? It gives you a lot of confidence, right? It's one of these secret gems that's going on, and obviously a great story to share. And thank you for that. When our discussions with DePauli, and I just finished writing a research paper on corporate purpose. I just came back from speaking to about 150 CEOs in the insurance industry, and obviously a lot of them were from the medical reinsurance of the medical industry, right? And it was interesting although we weren't talking about literature review automation software, they were all very focused on what is the corporate purpose or the promise, and a discussion around how it has to be so much more to move people to action. So I was just curious, now you've got DePauli on board, just a little bit about stepping back, and you probably have some new attributes or I would call it acute focus on extended attributes, but what is the company's brand promise that you can count on you for, Peter?
We have 3 brand pillars, and they are really our purpose. And they are always leading, always innovating, and always trusted. And the nuances behind those, we invented the space for literature review software. We were the first people to market with a product. We continue to lead in that space. And as you know, perfection's a moving target, and you can't stand still. So always innovating is another key tenet of what we do. We reinvest most of what we bring in continuous innovation, and the product team has grown tremendously over the years, to the point where it's a large team, and they're always looking for ways to make it better, with about 6 to 10 new releases per year at this point. And the always trusted, we do right by our customers. Our customers are doing really important work. We need them to be successful. Everybody in our company is a consumer of healthcare products. We want them to be better products on the market, and cheaper products on the market, and more effective ones. So anything we can do to help with that process. And if you look at our CSAT ratings, for example, they're up in the high 90s right now. They're way above industry benchmarks, and that's by design. We don't let our customers fail. If we anything we can do to help them be successful, we will invest in that. So those are the 3 things.
It strikes me just listening to you, Peter, that one of the value messages, is very much on not just keeping the clients safe, obviously their consumers safe, but also the cybersecurity risks as well, right? There's another value proposition there, just because of the concerns about the quality of the data. And your platform, no doubt, has very strong privacy security infrastructures that can really, help all of them, not just surface the right context and the audit trails, but also keep them, very much in tune of the best thinking, right?
Yeah, our customers would not be able to use us if we didn't have that those factors in place. So yeah, it's a fundamental. It's table stakes for our industry, but we take it.
For sure. Wanted to appreciate when you mentioned, you've got multiple releases through the years, or over the course of the year, which makes perfect sense. But are there any new areas that are going to be coming into the market? Any highlights that you can share, or incremental functionality with the offering that you want to kind of do a little bit of pre-messaging around?
Well, we're basically always moving things forward. The areas right now this year that we'll see significant advancements are on data reuse. Organizations obviously do literature reviews in more than one place, but oftentimes those silos don't communicate with one another and they repeat a lot of work. By connecting them all through our platform, basically the system can identify when references have already been reviewed by somebody else, where data has already been extracted, and that data can be reused, significantly reducing the amount of new work required, and also preventing inconsistencies across data. If you have 3 different people doing the same job in 3 different places, you're going to get 3 different sets of results. And that's going to put you in a pretty bad situation when it comes to a regulatory review. So it prevents that issue. The other area, of course, is continuing to evolve our AI story. We've always been very big on pragmatic implementation of AI. It's not a big red button that attempts to solve all your problems. It's AI. In many cases, you don't even see it working. It's working in the background, but it is working to dramatically reduce the workload by basically leaping ahead of the reviewers and helping them complete their tasks. In some cases by 70 to 80%, so dramatically faster. Also checks for errors. It also checks for anything that's been missed, and so on. But we're doubling down on that this year with some additional, much more advanced data extraction technologies that will allow basically the system to read full text documents and find all of the key data elements you're looking for, or the key data attributes you're looking for, with very little human intervention. We always want to have humans in the loop. You cannot afford to have errors in your data sets. Errors could be potentially fatal to people. So you want to make sure there's always humans in the loop, but you want to make that the human basically only doing the intellectual work, not the busy work. And that's where we bring in the AI components.
That's a really good summary, and I'm really glad you're reinforcing the human components, because obviously humans are accountable. You can't sue an algorithm, right? You need those checks and balances. In terms of, obviously, there's been a lot of newsworthy items on ChatGPT, and also just recently, Geoffrey Hinton just I think it was yesterday, advised that he was stepping down from Google. What are your perspectives on ChatGPT or generative AI? Are you starting to look at that in the labs, or look at how you might integrate with OpenAI's solution set?
Not specifically OpenAI, but generative AI has a place. Again, I think we're in the middle of the hype cycle right now. So what generative AI has primarily done is slow the sales process down, because people are now looking for that big blue button they can push and have it answer all their questions. But though you can't sue an algorithm, you can certainly sue somebody who used that algorithm irresponsibly.
Sure.
And if you're using ChatGPT to generate clinical data, then you're probably going to end up in jail, or at least in court. That said, we know that ChatGPT and similar generative algorithms can be used for a lot of interesting things. For example, just template generation, accelerating the write-up process for sure. And that's the kind of area we are exploring right now. So helping basically lay down the framework of your report. So again, you're not doing the busy work. You're not filling in all the minutia. You're filling in the raw data, the stuff that requires intellectual capacity.
Yeah, it's really good to hear the understanding of the value of these technologies, but also the limitations. And in your world with clinical trials, there really needs to be cautiousness. And I think we're seeing, the market reactions here. It's no question we're in the hype cycle. It's been interesting for me as a former venture capitalist to follow the valuation cycles and how they're holding their own in the generative AI space. And yet we also know the legislation is will be here. I suspect in Canada we'll see something in early next year. I don't think it'll be here quite this year. There's drafts. In the US, obviously, there's lots of conversations, and the European Union is, moving as fast as they can to move all the OECD countries to, hopefully, as they would say, being a Western Canadian gal, grew up on a farm, to better pastures. So I hope something comes for the more audit side of things. Wanted to step back a little bit. Let's move away from the AI side. Obviously, the opportunity to move high, tasks that require a lot of human time and aren't really as value add is really where you're applying things, but with the rigor that's needed for the thoughtfulness on the decision making. Putting a great company together and solving a use case that's important and valuable requires a lot of core value or architecture into your organization. I'd love just to hear, when you step back and putting all the building blocks together, and it may just be a reflection, but also as you go forward and you continue to grow, are there 3 or 5 key lessons that you think are really important to drive the scalability and growth? And any words of advice for other entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's no rocket science for us at all. It's about solving real world problems. And if we step back and look at, and ChatGPT is a good example of that. There's a solution. People are trying to find problems they can solve with it. That's not the way we do it. We go at it the other way around. We find problems that need to be solved, that have value in their being solved, and that's where we try to get involved and bring usually technology to the table to resolve them. That allows us to get paying customers quicker. We've been self-financed for more than 12 years. And it's basically because we're bringing solutions together that people can use right out of the box. And again, not us trying to say, hey, we've got something really awesome here. How do we make it useful? Other basics things is, obviously know your domain. Certainly I've run into a lot of entrepreneurs who, again, are like myself. They're technology people, and they're going to go solve this medical problem, but maybe we don't really understand that medical problem that well. We don't understand the nuances, and the superficial problem that you're solving, you can usually solve pretty fast, but it's the nuances that get you in the end. So again, if you don't have the domain expertise, bring in people who do, so that you're not chasing your tail or missing the mark. And we even see that with potential competitors coming in. Again, they're technology people. The problem looks very simple on the surface, and so they build it out and they build technical debt the whole way down, and now they're stuck because they've basically painted themselves into a corner. So again, know your domain, and again, buy that knowledge if you don't have it in house. And I guess last is it. And you'll hear everybody talk about this. Ben Horowitz talks about it a lot. And it's all about the people. It's 100% about the people, having the right people in the right seats at the right time, depending on where you are at in the history of your company and the growth of your company. You have the right people in place, that magic happens. If you don't, in the best case, things just sort of trundle along but you never really get that magic. In worst case, everything comes apart. But yeah, the right people, you can never overinvest in your team, in my opinion.
When I was at with the insurance executives last week, they brought in a partner from McKinsey, and he just said something about, in terms of the magic of the people, they felt that was the number one leadership attribute, was the caring of the people so they can create their magic, right? It's the entrustment, the empowerment, but also recognizing when you need to put different, folks in different spots, right, to move an organization forward. That genuine authenticity is so needed, and we just need a lot more leaders that are thinking like you, like that, Peter. Closing comments, Peter, in the sense of leadership behaviors that you're trying to instill in all of your people. I sense I don't know if I want to put words in your mouth, but empathy, comes to mind, and nurturing. But what are the leadership key behaviors on the caring side that you really are working hard on to continue to build out? And it's obviously you'd have core strengths already, but to continue to attract, develop, and retain your talent.
Yeah, I'm going to drop a rather obscure, well, maybe not that obscure reference, but it's one that I've actually shared with my team a number of times now, which is from the television show Ted Lasso, when somebody basically asks for an opinion on her blind date. And one of the responses was, well, he's fine. He's absolutely fine. And the response from the other was, you shouldn't be settling for fine. You should feel like you've been hit by a bolt of lightning. It's fine. Everybody's fine, but that's not what you should be settling for. And so I think, when you're looking at your team, that's, we rate basically, if you're to look at the aggregate performance of every team member, we rate on a scale of 1 to 10. We only use 3, 6, and 9 because everything else is arbitrary. We want 9s or 6s that can become 9s. Everything else is fine, but fine isn't going to get you where you need to go. So we can't tolerate mediocrity on the team. We can try to help people move out of it, or if they're, and it's not necessarily through bad behavior, right? Sometimes it's just capacity or skill sets, right? But we can't tolerate having the wrong people in the wrong seats. We certainly can't tolerate genuine bad behavior. If we want a team that's highly collaborative, where people have they have the trust that they can speak their minds and not get shot to pieces. We can have spirited discussions, but they always need to be respectful. If people can't behave like that, they need to find other places to work. Honesty is super important. I don't like being surrounded by people who tell me I'm doing a good job, because I know that's not true a lot of the time. And so I'd much rather have people call me on things and be honest. And I guess the other piece is just, when you know you have the right people, give them some space and let them do what they do. They should know more about their domains than you do. And so you should let them use that. And the best analogy I can think of for that is, don't give them a map of where you want them to go. Give them a compass, and they will figure it out. They'll figure out the best path to where you want them to go. And that's sort of something I try to live by. Maybe it's a less I guess, dictatorial approach, and it's much more, you're here for a reason. Let's do this. And I certainly, if I'm being managed, that's the way I like to be managed as well. I chafe under micromanagement, and I would expect most really high-powered people do. So,
Peter, what a wonderful conversation. I'm leaving with these leadership perspectives of finding, shaping a compass so that you can find your own pathway, the underpinning of the importance of empowerment, also setting the bar high, but with the context that, you're a learning culture as well, really respecting people, and listening to multiple views. And I think also the precision and clarity that you have is, and the storytelling ability. I'm not familiar with that TV show, but the analogy was very, very helpful, because fine isn't good enough, right? In this fast-paced world that we live in, you want the people to bring the best of their best performance forward, and know that you'll catch them when they fall and help them get up and go forward. Just that, they need to catch up as well, right? If needed as well. So thank you so much, Peter, for joining us on this session of the Predictive AI World and sharing your story of the company. I'm going to turn things back to Malay as host, and he'll follow up with closing comments. But thank you so much, Peter, for joining us today.
it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy and Peter. And thank you, Cindy, for summarizing a conversation that really went so far beyond just the literature reviews automation to indeed teach us some great points on leadership. Peter shared his secret to company's growth for the keen ears over there. And that was absolutely gold. And of course, there was a healthy conversation around AI and data and dealing with silos. And for all of that, Peter, thank you so much. This conversation has been so much more than even we had anticipated. And we're going to carry all of that, all of those lessons with us. With that, I'd like to, of course, bring this to a close. As a final word on DistillerSR, please visit their LinkedIn page or their website at distillersr.com, where you will have the aforementioned case studies, as well as everything you need to know about the company. You'll be able to keep in touch with the updates as they come about and join their incredible growth story, of course, and benefit from it. So to conclude, we are, of course, as always, thankful and gracious for the opportunity to have yet another wonderful conversation. This is the AI Predictive World. You can find it at saleschoice.com/resources. You will catch many more, many different varieties of discussions and thought leadership that you will learn a lot from: webinars, podcasts, white papers, and blogs. With that, we have come to a close now, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, Dipali, once again for helping us set this up. From Cindy and I and the entire SalesChoice family, stay happy, stay productive. Bye-bye.